I work as a sheriff in a small town in Maine. If you ever wear this badge, you'd better follow the rules, or you won't live to see sunrise. That's not a warning I came up with on my own. Those were the exact words the old sheriff told me when he handed me the keys to the office, the badge, and the single most important thing in this cursed job, a thin envelope filled with handwritten rules. I've worked in law enforcement before. I've pulled drunks out of fights, written up speeding tickets, even dealt with a couple of cases where folks brought guns to arguments they shouldn't have. But nothing prepared me for this place. This town doesn't behave the way a normal town should. The crimes here aren't about people stealing from one another or breaking into stores. It's about keeping something older, darker, in check, something that doesn't care about our laws. When I first sat in that quiet office with the envelope in my hands, I thought Dalton, that was the old sheriff, was just messing with me. Some kind of elaborate hazing ritual. He told me, flat out, that he wasn't quitting because he wanted to. He was quitting because he'd lived longer than most who wore the badge here, and he wanted to get out while he still could. Don't think of it as law enforcement, he said. Think of it as survival. Your duty isn't just to the town. It's to yourself. Follow those rules, every single one, and maybe you'll last longer than me. I didn't believe him, not fully, not at first. But after my first night, I wish I had burned those words into my skull before I ever set foot in that office. Because he was right. Out here, the rules are the only thing keeping me alive. The town itself isn't much to look at. If you drove through it on a bright summer afternoon, you'd think it was like any other sleepy New England town. A diner with chipped paint, a gas station that still uses an old mechanical pump, a post office that closes by 4? But that's in the day. At night, the place changes. Fog rolls in from the coast, so thick it blots out the stars. The trees creak even without the wind, and every sound seems too close, like the whole forest leans in to listen. The locals never come out after dark, unless they absolutely have to. Most of them know better. And when they do see me walking the streets in uniform, they give me this look. Not respect, not fear of the law, but pity. Like they know I've signed my life away. Sheriff Dalton had been here for decades. He never spoke about what he saw. At least not in public. The only glimpse I got was when I met him in his house on the edge of town to take over the job. He looked tired, older than his years, his hands covered in faded scars that looked like rope burns. This isn't a job you take to make a difference, he told me. It's a job you take because someone has to. Someone has to keep the line held. That night, before I headed into the station, I sat in my truck and opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper, lined and yellowing, written in shaky but careful handwriting. At the top, underlined twice, was the word rules. I'll admit, I almost laughed. It felt ridiculous. I expected instructions about paperwork, about when to patrol, about who to call if the radio went down. Instead, what I found was a list that read more like warnings carved into an old lighthouse wall. The first one read, "Never pull anyone over after midnight, no matter the offense." The second, "If you hear a call from the North Woods, do not answer it." And the list went on, growing stranger, more unsettling. At first, I thought Dalton had lost it. Maybe the years alone had broken him. But part of me, the part that remembered his eyes when he handed me the badge, knew better. My first night in uniform would erase any doubt I had. Rule number 1 came for me just after midnight. I was driving down one of the back roads that cut through the pines when I saw headlights in my mirror. A car barreled past me, going at least 70 on a road where 40 would already be pushing it. Instinct kicked in. I reached for the siren switch. It's what any sheriff would do. Then I remembered. The rule. Never pull anyone over after midnight. I hesitated, hand hovering over the switch. The taillights of the car grew smaller in the distance. I told myself maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe I'd catch them later. But then something happened that froze my blood. As the car passed under a patch of moonlight breaking through the fog, I saw something in the back seat. A figure. It didn't move like a person. Its head was pressed against the glass, too wide, too pale. Its mouth opened in a silent scream as the car sped on. I blinked and the lights vanished. Not down the road, just gone. One moment there, the next swallowed by the dark. I pulled over, heart hammering, my hand still hovering over the siren. If I hadn't remembered that rule, if I had chased them, I don't know if I'd be telling this story. That was when it hit me. These weren't suggestions. They were survival guides. Maine has a beauty that fools you if you only pass through during the day. On the surface, my town looks like the kind of place you'd see in a postcard. Tall pine forests stretching all the way to the horizon. Clapboard houses leaning against the wind, the distant smell of salt carried inland from the coast. But when you live here long enough, when you see the way the fog rises from the ocean and refuses to let go, you realize the beauty hides something else, something patient, something waiting. It isn't a big town. We've got a single diner that closes too early, a post office that's barely kept alive by the handful of locals still mailing letters, and a gas station that seems older than most of the folks who pump fuel there. At first glance, nothing about this place should feel threatening, but when the sun goes down, the town empties like a spilled bucket. Doors lock, curtains close, and lights flicker out one by one until the streets are left abandoned. You could walk down Main Street at midnight and hear nothing but your own footsteps. No traffic, no laughter from a bar, no stray dogs. Just you and the silence pressing in from all sides. The people here know better than to call the sheriff unless it's life or death. That's one of the first things I noticed. They let things slide that would have earned an arrest in any other county. You learn quick that what goes unreported is more frightening than the things that do. They don't call because they know calling won't save them. Not from what lives in the woods. Not from what walks the shoreline when the moon is hidden. I didn't understand that at first, but Dalton did. Sheriff Dalton had been here longer than I'd been alive. When I was first approached to take over the job, he looked at me the way a man might look at his replacement gravedigger. His house was at the very edge of town, a sagging farmhouse swallowed by trees. I still remember stepping into his kitchen and noticing the way his hands shook as he poured coffee. Not from age, but from exhaustion, like the weight of every night had finally caught up with him. There were scars across his fingers and wrists, rope-like marks that looked old but deep. He caught me staring and quickly pulled his sleeves down. He didn't explain them, and I didn't ask. Instead, he slid a thin envelope across the table toward me. No badge, no oath, no official paperwork. Just that envelope. I remember the scratch of the paper under my thumb, the way the flap had been folded and unfolded so many times, it had softened at the edges. "If you're going to wear that star," he said, his voice quiet but sharp, "you follow the rules. Don't question them. Don't test them. Just follow them." I thought it was a joke. A hazing ritual meant to shake me up before my first shift. But the look in Dalton's eyes told me otherwise. He wasn't joking. He was warning me. So I took the job. I told myself I needed the paycheck, that I wanted to serve the community, that someone had to keep order. I told myself a lot of things, but none of them explained why Dalton looked so relieved as I took that envelope, like a man passing on a curse. That evening, as I drove into town wearing the badge for the first time, I kept thinking about the scars on his hands, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes when I asked him if the rules were really necessary. He just muttered, "You'll see." And I did, because that night was the first time I realized the badge wasn't protection. It was a target. And if I was going to survive wearing it, I'd have to learn every one of those rules by heart. The first rule on Dalton's list was simple. Never pull anyone over after midnight, no matter the offense. At first, I thought it was ridiculous. How could a sheriff ignore a drunk driver weaving across the lane, or some idiot barreling down a back road at 70 miles an hour? The whole point of wearing the badge was to keep people safe. But that first night, I learned exactly why the rule was written. It was just after 12:30 when it happened. I was patrolling one of the narrow roads that cut through the forest, headlights tunneling through the fog. Out there, the trees crowd close to the pavement, their branches arching overhead like they're trying to swallow the road whole. It always feels like driving through a tunnel carved out of darkness. That's when I saw the glow in my rearview mirror, bright headlights racing up behind me, far too fast. The car shot past, its engine screaming, the taillights vanishing into the mist. Instinct took over. My hand went for the siren switch. That's what I was trained to do. Pull them over, write the ticket, prevent the accident. But as my fingers brushed the switch, I remembered the first rule. Dalton's words echoed in my head like they'd been burned there. Never pull anyone over after midnight. I froze, hand hovering, torn between training and survival. The car sped on, swallowed by fog. And then I saw it. For just a heartbeat, the moonlight broke through the cloud cover, pale and cold, and lit the back window of that speeding car. Something was pressed against the glass. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. The head was too large, too pale, the mouth stretched open, far too wide. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were black pits that seemed to drink in the light. The face was jammed against the glass, as if it was trying to push through, screaming without a sound. And then, it was gone. The taillights didn't fade into the distance. They didn't curve off down another road. One moment the car was there, the next it was swallowed whole by the fog. Like the road itself had decided it didn't belong anymore. I sat there in the dark, breath fogging the windshield, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. If I had flipped that siren on, if I had tried to chase them, I have no doubt I would have vanished along with that car. That's when I understood. The rules weren't superstition. They weren't a joke. They were warnings. And if I wanted to live through this job, I would have to follow them. Every single one. I'll admit something to you now. Out here, the woods have a voice. Sometimes it's soft, like a whisper carried on the breeze. Other times, it's sharp and panicked, as if someone's throat is tearing itself apart just to reach you. The first time I heard it, I thought it was real. I thought there was a person out there, dying, just waiting for me to do my job and save them. But there's a rule. Rule number 2. If you hear a call from the North Woods, do not answer it. People get lost for a reason. I didn't fully understand what that meant until my third night on patrol. The dispatcher's voice crackled in over the radio just past 1 in the morning. Static, then a clipped message. Unit 7, possible distress call, originating from the North Tree Line off County Road 9. Repeating, multiple reports of screams. At first, it sounded faint, far away, but then, almost as if the trees were leaning closer, the sound cut through the night. A voice, shrill, ragged, and desperate. Help. Somebody help me, please. It didn't sound like it was coming through the radio anymore. It sounded like it was right outside my cruiser. My hand hovered over the door handle. Every instinct screamed at me to go. That was my job, wasn't it? To protect, to respond. The training drilled into me since day 1 said no hesitation, no delay. But another voice, one colder, deeper, reminded me of the words my sergeant had repeated the night I started. Do not answer it, no matter how real it sounds. I gripped the wheel tighter. The cries didn't fade. They grew louder, closer, like whoever it was had stumbled from the forest edge and was staggering toward my headlights. I swear I could hear the crunch of leaves under their feet. And then came the part that nearly broke me. The voice, it shifted. In between the gasps for air, The begging, I heard it say my name. Not just officer or help me, but narrator's name. Please, come. My blood turned to ice. There was no way. No one out there knew my name. I locked the doors. I stared straight ahead. The cries stretched on for what felt like an hour, circling the cruiser, always just beyond the reach of the lights. Eventually, the woods swallowed them whole again, and silence returned. Later that week, at the diner, an older deputy leaned over his coffee and told me about the last rookie who ignored rule number 2. They'd buried what was left of him in a closed casket. I never asked for details. Some answers I'm not meant to have. There's a saying among night shift deputies: the bars don't always keep the danger out. Sometimes they just keep it in with you. That thought has been gnawing at me ever since the night I learned the 3rd rule. Never jail someone after 2 a.m. If they beg for arrest, let them go. It was late, closer to 2:30 in the morning, and the station was dead quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening, like it's waiting. I was at the front desk, half dozing over the logbook, when the banging started. At first I thought it was some drunk trying to shake off the night at the wrong building, but when I opened the door, I found a man standing there, wild-eyed and pale. He smelled of whiskey, sure, but the fear rolling off him was enough to cut through the haze. His knuckles were raw from pounding the glass. "Please," he gasped, voice breaking. "Please, lock me up. I don't care what you charge me with. Just, please, put me in a cell." I froze. Everything in me wanted to follow procedure. A drunk disturbing the peace, easy overnight hold, slam the paperwork, toss him in the tank, sort it out in the morning. That's what any other officer would do. But the rule, it echoed in the back of my head, the kind of echo that feels heavier than memory. Never jail someone after 2 a.m. My throat went dry. I told him no, that he couldn't come inside. The man's face twisted, first in disbelief, then in desperation. He started crying, pounding the door with the flat of his hand. "You don't understand. It's out there. It's coming. Please, please don't leave me out here." I almost caved. God help me, I almost broke. But my hand stayed frozen on the lock, and I shook my head. After a few seconds, his strength failed him. He slumped against the wall, muttering broken prayers. Eventually, he staggered over to the bench just under the street lamp, collapsed onto it, and curled up like a child. I watched him through the blinds. I wanted to believe the worst of it was over, that the rule had saved me from some hidden mistake I couldn't yet see. But then the shadows at the edge of the lot began to move. At first, it looked like branches swaying in the breeze. Then, slowly, something detached itself from the tree line and slid across the pavement. Its shape was wrong, human maybe, but stretched with arms too long, dragging fingers that scraped against the asphalt. The man must have heard it, because he sat bolt upright, staring into the dark. He didn't even scream. He just froze. And then it took him. One long arm coiled around his chest, another around his legs, and in a single jerking motion, he was yanked off the bench and dragged into the shadows. His nails scraped against the pavement, leaving faint white trails that vanished as quickly as he did. I didn't move. I couldn't. And that's when the truth hit me. The cells weren't protection. They were bait. Whatever hunts after 2 a.m. doesn't want them locked up safe. It wants them delivered. And I almost gave it exactly what it was waiting for. The 4th rule always struck me as the strangest one on Dalton's list. Do not trust anyone wearing a deputy's badge you don't recognize. At first, I figured it was just an old man's paranoia. Maybe Dalton had trust issues. Maybe he didn't want outsiders snooping around his quiet little town. But after that night, I stopped asking questions. It was about an hour past midnight when I heard the knock at the station door. Firm, steady, professional. I opened the blinds just a little, and sure enough, there he was. A man in uniform, standing tall, badge gleaming under the buzzing porch light. He looked the part. Tan shirt, pressed pants. The kind of posture that screamed academy trained. He even had the polite smile of a man trying to put a stranger at ease. "Evening, deputy," he said through the glass. "Name's Carson. Transferred from Bayfield County. They told me I'd be working nights with you. Thought I'd come by and introduce myself." My heart leapt at the idea of backup. God knows I could use it. But the rule, it slipped into my mind like a whisper. Do not trust anyone wearing a deputy's badge you don't recognize. I forced myself to study him closer. Everything looked normal, almost too normal. His skin was a shade too pale for a man standing out in the night air. His smile didn't falter, not once, not even when the silence stretched on. And his eyes, they didn't blink, not once during the whole exchange. Something in my gut twisted. My hand hovered on the door latch, then fell away. "I wasn't told about any transfer," I said, keeping my tone careful, steady. "You'll have to check in with Sheriff Dalton in the morning." His smile stretched just a little too wide. Dalton retired, didn't he? That made my stomach sink. I hadn't told anyone outside the department yet. I shook my head, feigning indifference. Like I said, check in tomorrow. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The porch light flickered overhead, buzzing like an angry wasp. Then, without another word, he tipped his hat. Yes, a hat I swear wasn't there a moment ago, and walked away into the dark. I stayed at the door long after he left, listening, waiting. But there was no car, no footsteps fading down the road. Just silence. I tried to tell myself I imagined the whole thing, that maybe I was overtired, that maybe the rule had gotten inside my head. But later that night, when I stepped outside for a breath of air, I saw him again. He was standing at the tree line across the lot, half hidden among the pines. No smile this time, no hat. Just that same unblinking stare, locked on me from the shadows. I went back inside and locked the door. And that's when I understood the rule. It wasn't about paranoia. It wasn't about keeping outsiders away. It was a warning. Because whatever I saw that night, whatever wore that uniform, it wasn't a deputy. And it sure as hell wasn't human. There's an old stone church in the center of town, perched on a rise like it's been watching us for centuries. By day, it looks ordinary enough. A white steeple, cracked stained glass windows, a bell tower that hasn't been used in living memory. Or at least, that's what people say. But Dalton's rules told me otherwise. Rule number 5. If the church bell rings after midnight, stay inside. Do not look out the window. The first time it happened, I didn't believe my own ears. It was just past 1 in the morning when the sound rolled through the town. A single deep toll, heavy enough to rattle the glass panes of the station. It wasn't the crisp clang of metal you'd expect. No, this bell sounded old, drowned in distortion, as if the iron itself had corroded, and the sound was dragging centuries of rust behind it. My coffee trembled on the desk, ripples dancing on its surface. I froze. The rules came flooding back. Stay inside. Do not look. But when the second toll hit, the vibration went through my chest, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I found myself at the blinds before I realized what I was doing. One hand slowly peeling them apart. I wish I hadn't. The town square below was not empty. Figures moved through it, dozens of them, spilling from side streets like shadows pulled by invisible strings. But they weren't walking normally. Each one moved backward, their steps deliberate, their spines rigid. No one stumbled, no one swayed. They flowed together like a film playing in reverse, and they were all heading toward the church. The bell tolled again. The figures froze mid-step. Every head turned, not toward the church, but toward me, toward the station. I dropped the blinds like they burned me, and stumbled back, my pulse thundering in my ears. The air inside the station felt suddenly heavy, suffocating. as if the sound itself had crept inside and was pressing against my lungs. The bell rang a fourth time. This one dragged on longer than the rest, the kind of sound that feels like it could tear the sky open. My hands shook as I locked the doors, as if any lock could hold back what I'd just seen. For a full minute, the world outside went still. No movement, no sound but that fading vibration humming in the bones of the building. I sat in the dark, not daring to breathe too loud. And then silence. I waited another 10 minutes before I gathered the courage to peek again. The square was empty. Not a single trace of the figures remained. The church sat in silence, its steeple a black silhouette against the night sky. The next morning, the town carried on like nothing had happened. Shops opened. Kids rode bikes across the same square that had been filled with whatever those things were. I asked an older local, casually, if the church was ever used. He went quiet, his eyes darting away like I'd asked about something indecent. He only said, "Best keep your head down at night, deputy." That was all. But I know what I saw, and I know this much. When that bell rings, it isn't calling anyone to worship. It's summoning something else. I didn't think much of the phone at first. Dispatch lines are supposed to ring. That's their purpose. Calls come in, you answer them, you log the details, and you move on. But the laminated sheet taped above the desk said otherwise. I stared at those words more than once, wondering if it was just some kind of small-town superstition. Maybe the previous dispatcher wrote it as a joke, the same way people write "Don't feed the gremlins" on notes in office fridges. But the longer I stayed in that building, the less anything felt like a joke. The night it finally happened, I knew immediately what it was. The phone on the desk was an old rotary style, the kind you'd see in a museum. Heavy, cold plastic, with a faint yellowing along the edges. It hadn't rung once in the 2 weeks I'd worked there. Not once. And then, at exactly 12:47 a.m., it screamed to life. The first ring cut through the silence like a blade. I froze, pen halfway across the page of the logbook. The second ring followed, long and shrill, and my stomach tightened. The third ring dragged on, almost vibrating the air in the room. Then, silence. I exhaled, remembering the rule, 3 rings. Never before the fourth. Wait, the seconds stretched. My eyes never left the phone. The building was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent light above me. I counted in my head, 5, 10, 15. Then it started again. Ring 1. I felt my hands go clammy. Ring 2. My heart thudded so loud I swore it drowned out the sound. Ring 3. I swallowed, forcing myself to wait for the fourth. That was the rule. That was the warning. I just had to wait. One more. But fear does strange things to the mind. The silence between the third and what should have been the fourth stretched just a little too long. My nerves snapped. My hand shot forward before I even realized it, grabbing the receiver on the third. The click of the line opening echoed in my ears. I didn't hear static. I didn't hear a dispatcher, or a wrong number, or even breathing. What I heard was my own voice, distorted, whispering, "Leave the badge on the desk if you want to live." The words slithered into my ear, each one fractured, like my voice was being dragged across broken glass. It wasn't just similar. It was identical. The same tone, the same rhythm, the same pauses I used when I was nervous. I dropped the receiver like it burned. It swung on the cord, hitting the side of the desk with a dull thud. The line didn't go dead. From the earpiece, my voice, no, that voice, kept repeating, louder now, more insistent. "Leave the badge, leave the badge. Leave the badge if you want to live." I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. The badge on my chest suddenly felt like a weight pulling me underwater. The thought of unclipping it, Setting it down on the desk made the hair on my neck rise, but so did keeping it pinned in place. The fourth ring never came, and that was worse than anything. I thought I'd been careful. I thought I'd followed the rules well enough to stay alive. But the thing no one tells you is that rules don't break one at a time. They stack, they overlap, and when they do, it feels like the whole town is trying to pull you under at once. It started with the car. I heard it before I saw it. The low hum of an engine rolling slow along the road outside the station. The headlights cut across the wall like twin blades of light, sweeping, searching. My chest tightened. I remembered rule number 1 clearly. If the same black sedan passes the station more than once, do not acknowledge it. Do not go outside. Do not wave. So I sat frozen at my desk, eyes fixed on the badge in front of me, like it was an anchor. The car crept past. Its engine faded. I let out a breath. But then the crying started, soft at first, like a child muffled under blankets. It came from the woods behind the station, drifting through the trees, wrapping itself around the walls. The longer I sat there, the more voices joined. Dozens, maybe hundreds. The rules for that one were just as clear. If you hear crying in the woods, do not investigate. Block your ears if you have to. I pressed my palms against my head, squeezing my eyes shut, rocking forward in the chair as the sound swelled. But muffling it only made it worse. My heartbeat filled the gaps, and the cries twisted into words. My name, spoken in voices that weren't mine. Then the bell tolled, deep, hollow, a vibration that made the glass in the windows tremble. 1 strike, 2, 3. I knew what that meant. Rule number 5. If the church bell rings after midnight, stay inside. Do not look out the window. I kept my head down. I didn't dare glance at the blinds, but the sound shook the station like the bell was right above me, rattling every nerve in my body. And then, through all of it, the front door creaked open. Boot steps, slow, heavy, the kind that didn't bother to hide. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. The imposter, the deputy who wasn't real. The rules screamed in my head. If he comes in, don't speak. Don't acknowledge him. Don't answer questions. Pretend you don't see him. My entire body shook. I forced myself to stare at the logbook on my desk, pen frozen above the page. The air in the room grew heavy, thick, as if the walls had moved in closer. The imposter walked past me, boots echoing on the floor. I could see him in the corner of my eye. His shape was wrong. His uniform stretched over something taller, thinner than a man. He stopped beside the desk, and I swear I felt him bend down, leaning close enough that I could hear the shift of his breath. "Leave the badge," he whispered. The same words I'd heard on the phone, except this time, they weren't my voice. The sedan's headlights swept across the window again, flooding the room in white for a moment. The bell tolled louder, rattling the walls. The cries from the woods grew deafening, and in that instant, all the rules collided. I shoved back from the desk, nearly knocking the chair over. My body moved on instinct. I didn't look out the window. I didn't answer the thing in uniform. I shoved my fingers into my ears as I ran, sprinting for the back exit of the station. The door slammed open, spilling me into the night air. The crying roared louder, but I kept my eyes on the ground, on the dirt path I knew would lead me toward the tree line. The woods weren't safe, but staying behind with that imposter wasn't an option. Branches clawed at my arms and face as I stumbled into the trees. The voices followed me, not just behind, but all around. Some were high-pitched, pleading. Others were guttural, broken. I didn't dare look. I just ran. Somewhere in the distance, the bell kept tolling, marking each second I stayed alive. The car's headlights flashed through the trees, cutting across my path. For one terrifying moment, I thought it had turned into the woods to chase me. I nearly tripped, lungs burning, but I forced myself onward. Every step was a gamble, every breath a prayer. And then, light. Not headlights, not moonlight. The faintest glow of dawn bleeding through the trees. I broke through the last of the branches, collapsing into the clearing, just as the sky began to pale. Behind me, the cries cut off all at once. The bell fell silent. The imposter's footsteps faded like mist. The rules had held, barely. I lay there on the dirt, staring up at the morning sky, gasping like a drowning man. For the first time all night, the world felt still, safe, almost normal. But I knew better. Because dawn only meant one thing. I had survived this night, and another would come. When the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, it was like the whole world exhaled. The cries had stopped. The bell had fallen silent. Even the air felt lighter, as though the pressure that had been building all night had finally lifted. I sat on the gravel outside the station, back against the wall, too exhausted to move. My uniform was torn, my hands scraped raw, but I was alive. Somehow I had made it through. The rules had saved me. That much I knew. Every instinct had screamed at me to look, to speak, to run in the wrong direction. But clinging to those words on the paper, following them like scripture, was the only thing that kept me breathing when the night seemed determined to snuff me out. By the time I forced myself back inside, the station looked unchanged. The logbook sat open on the desk. The badge still rested where I'd left it. No sign of the imposter deputy. No sign of anything at all. For a moment, I wondered if it had all been in my head. Then the phone rang. Just once. A clean, ordinary ring. I stared at it, blood pounding in my ears. Another ring. Then silence. And finally, a third. My body locked up. I nearly couldn't bring myself to touch it. But the rules were clear. Not until the fourth. I waited. When it rang again, I lifted the receiver with shaking hands. Dalton, the voice said. Not distorted, not strange. Just the tired, gravelly voice of Sheriff Dalton, the man who had once sat in this chair. You still got the badge? He asked. I glanced down at it, shining dully under the pale morning light. Yeah, I whispered. My throat was dry. I almost broke the rules. The line was silent for a moment. Then Dalton let out a weary breath. Then you know why I quit. I wanted to ask him more. How long he'd lasted. How many nights it had taken before he'd finally walked away. I wanted him to tell me what the rules were preparing me for, what these things outside really were. But the line clicked dead before I could say a word. I lowered the receiver slowly, heart still hammering, eyes fixed on the badge in front of me. Dalton had quit, he'd walked away. But me, I was still here. And the question that gnawed at me wasn't if I could survive another night. It was how many. The sun was up, the streets looked normal again, and the station was quiet. But I knew better. Normal here was only a mask, a thin cover draped over something hungry, something patient. I keep telling myself I've shared enough for now. But the truth is, there are more rules I haven't told you yet. Rules that don't fit neatly on the paper because they only reveal themselves when you're already too deep to turn back. Last night, I thought I had seen the worst of it. The car, the voices, the bell, the badge that didn't belong. But those were only reminders, warnings. The real tests, they're still waiting. And if I'm being honest, part of me wonders if the rules themselves are changing. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about breaking one, just to see what happens. Maybe that's how this place works. Maybe the rules aren't just to keep us safe. Maybe they're bait, too. Either way, I know one thing. The nights ahead will be worse. Much worse. If you want to hear what happens when rule number 7 is broken, you'll need to stick around. Because the worst part of this job isn't surviving one night. It's realizing you have to come back the next.